Y'all know we're always gonna hype our local theater scene, but sometimes we know people want to get away. That's why if you're headed to the Northeast, I'm gonna put y'all on to the Williamstown Theater Festival this summer. From July 17th to August 3rd, among the Berkshire Mountains in northwestern Massachusetts, over 130 artists will take the stage for nearly 100 performances. Some of the offerings include a world premiere from Jeremy O. Harris, a production of Camino Reels starring Pamela Anderson and Nicholas Alexander Chavez, and a new adaptation of a Samuel Barber opera. Discounted hotel rooms are available through June 1st. Go to WTFestival.org and make your plans to immerse yourself in theater this summer. Today on CityCast Chicago, we are having a much needed conversation about domestic violence in our city. And we're talking about the 5 years since police murders sparked protests across the country. Plus, we want to know, what are you doing with your Memorial Day weekend? It's Friday, May 23rd. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I am joined by WTTW anchor and reporter Brandis Friedman. Brandis, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We've also got Block Club Chicago's investigative reporter Mina Bloom in the building. Mina, it's good to see you, my friend.
You too. Thanks for having me.
If you are new to the podcast, welcome. We appreciate you being here. CityCast Chicago, Monday through Friday, #1 podcast in the city. Please go through the crates, 1,000+ episodes to explore. But if this is your first episode, kind of start slow, dip your toe in, go back through some of the conversations we had this week, summer reading lists, 24-hour restaurants. We talked about why Chicago alleys are the second city to the second city. So get into it. Every single Friday, though, we bring our friends in to break down some of the biggest stories they are working on, they're reading this week. And we always make space in every episode for some good news. I usually say that to the end, but I was feeling good this morning. And it's probably because I know I got a 3-day weekend coming up. And I want to start with y'all. Brandis, do you have any plans for Memorial Day weekend? Do you go to a parade? Do you take time to yourself? What are you doing with your hopefully extended weekend?
Yeah, well, and I'm lucky. I'm taking tomorrow off just for fun. So I've actually got a 4-day weekend. So
oh my God.
Thank you very much. That's extra good news. Lots of family stuff this weekend. I think we're getting together with some neighbor friends tomorrow night. My husband and I are going to check out Parachute Hi-Fi over the weekend. So I'm excited about that.
I've been hearing all about that. The vibes look good over there.
Yes. Right. Well, and it's been on my list for a little while, right? I'm a big fan of Beverly Kim and Johnny Clark, and, I've tried to support their restaurants when I can. And I haven't been to this one. And it just so happens that also this week, the Trib reviewed it and they had a write-up in, I think it was Chicago Magazine. So now I'm like, man, now everybody's going to be there. But that's good for them. That is, I don't want to look like somebody who showed up just because of the review. I wanted to go anyway, but my time is tight, as we all know. So I'm still excited about going, though. And obviously, if everybody is there, then it's good. It's good for them.
We're going to talk about another spot up in Avondale, but Parachute Hi-Fi, 3500 North Elston. I will drop a link in the show notes for people listening. Mina, over to you. What are you looking forward to this weekend?
I'm really looking forward to this weekend because I have a 20-month-old and we happen to have 2 sets of very close friends. One that have a baby right around Fiona's age and another that have a baby right around Fiona's age. So we've got some friends coming in from Detroit. We're going to just have a baby party. I got matching T-shirts for the kids. I'm so excited. They're all going to wear T-shirts with a different animal on them. Are you kidding?
How many little ones are going to be at this party?
Okay, so there's going to be 3 toddlers and 1 little baby.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I'm going to need pictures of these T-shirts.
I will post pictures. I will send pictures to you guys individually. It's going to be cute.
My kids are big now, so we don't... I mean, they're still cute, but they're not as cute.
Yeah,
they certainly won't wear the matching T-shirts.
If you are still looking for something to do, please head over to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, and our events calendar at chicago.citycast.fm, where we've got everything for you from service events in Hegewisch, Memorial Day parades from McKinley Park down to Beverly to the Chicago's big Memorial Day parade downtown, and so much more for you. So please bookmark our events calendar at chicago.citycast.fm. Our two top stories this Friday do contain descriptions of domestic violence, abuse, police violence, and murder. And so I do want you to take some time, if you need it, as a listener before we jump in. Mina, city officials have recently discussed the various drops in violent crimes like homicides, assaults, and armed robbery. And as expected, the mayor's office are celebrating these as wins. But one place that has gotten far less attention is the continuing rise of domestic violence across the city of Chicago, where homicides and assaults are up this year. And I say continuing because this is an unfortunate and tragic statistical trend that we've seen since the breakout of the pandemic 5 years ago. Mina, you led an investigation into this crisis. Can you talk to us about what you learned?
So my story is focused on 19-year-old Demaria Williams. She was a teen from South Shore. She was killed last September, allegedly by her boyfriend. And what I found through months of reporting is that she suffered abuse from her boyfriend for months leading up to the fatal incident. And she did not seek help from the police. She did not take out an order of protection. Then what I found is that there are so many people like Demaria in our city who do not seek help, who don't call the police, who don't take out an order of protection, who are suffering abuse behind closed doors. And I dug into this issue and looked at all of the domestic homicides from last year and found that a very small portion of the people who were killed last year actually had taken out orders of protection against their accused attackers. I also dug into just the numbers themselves. Our domestic homicides are up 33% so far this year over last year. I know you mentioned that community violence is down. Domestic violence is not. Domestic violence is still high. And I know you mentioned that domestic violence, it ramped up at the height of the pandemic. That is absolutely correct, and it's worth repeating. Domestic violence around the country really accelerated at the height of the pandemic. People were trapped at home. They were with their abusers at home, and they didn't have anywhere to go. And there was economic distress and more issues at home that led to more violence. And unfortunately, the violence that we saw at the height of the pandemic, it has really remained quite high in the city of Chicago and across the country. And what I also found in looking deeply at this crisis is that it's very difficult for victims and survivors of domestic violence in Chicago to get the services that they need to escape these abusive relationships. And when I say services, I mean counseling, shelter. The city of Chicago has a severe lack of emergency shelter beds. We have a few hundred shelter beds for the whole city of Chicago. That is abysmal, frankly. And a lot of advocates have told me that the funding for these services is really drying up. It's difficult for organizations to get funding to, for example, run school prevention programs. Like you may recall being in high school and having a sex ed program where you learn about sex as a teen. It's really hard for organizations to do those kinds of programs and talk about healthy relationships. They can't get the funding for that kind of thing. But even more than that, on a more basic level, we don't have enough attorneys to help victims file orders of protection in civil court. These are really big challenges facing our city. And the last thing that I'll just add is that these foundational funding problems that have been accelerating over the last several years, they're now being compounded by what we're seeing at the federal level, which is that the Trump administration is slashing funding for nonprofits across the country. And the American Rescue Plan Act funding, the pandemic dollars that we've relied on so heavily as a city to fund really essential services like domestic violence services, that is all expiring at the end of the year. So there is a big fear among domestic violence advocates that people in abusive relationships are going to have fewer and fewer resources that they need to get out of these relationships.
As I've talked to advocates, individuals who have themselves been in domestic violence situations, it's clear to me that not only are assaults not taken seriously, talked about enough, that the police response is underwhelming to say the least, but all of the signs and steps that precede abuse, if there are any, whether it's intimidation, whether it's stalking, whether it's sort of control over one's movement, like these things are not talked about enough. They're sort of left behind closed doors, treated as like sort of interpersonal conflict versus broader concerns and broader histories of violence that largely targets women, femmes, trans women, and others. As you were going through your reporting, one of the things that became clear is that the various agencies, who can help people after the fact are understaffed, underfunded, and have inadequate responses. Like when we hear violent crime is down, we know the city means that about sort of neighborhood homicides and armed robberies, but they're not talking specifically about the type of domestic violence so many face on a daily basis.
That's exactly right. And it is something that I heard a lot doing this reporting, that we focus so much on community violence, and we should focus on community violence, but we don't focus an even amount on domestic violence, and it's impacting thousands of people every year. I mean, the Chicago Police Department gets 50,000 domestic violence calls a year. They say that that's like a huge share of the calls that they get every year. Domestic violence really is an epidemic, and we don't treat it like it is one, which is really part of the problem. We've dealt with other epidemics as a country. I think we've made progress with things like drunk driving or with the opioid crisis. We have like little cards in bathrooms that say like, are you a victim of human trafficking? Are you like, please don't drive drunk home? We don't do that as much for domestic violence, or at least I'm not familiar with it. And the folks that I've been talking to say that we don't treat it the same as those other issues in society. So I do think that we do need a cultural shift. That's a much tougher problem to solve. And there are a lot of people in Chicago working to make that a reality. But as I've said, they really need the funding and the resources to do them. And certainly if the Trump administration is going to take funding away from these small organizations, that's going to be really hard to do.
So I cover prisons a good bit. And last year there was the case of a young man who was killed when Jaden Perkins, trying to protect his mother who was pregnant from her boyfriend who had been released from prison on mandatory supervised release. That man obviously is now reincarcerated on charges related to that. I noticed actually just yesterday in the General Assembly, to be sure that victims, survivors of domestic violence are included in those early release hearings before the Illinois Prisoner Review Board. So give victim impact statements and more notification when their abuser is up for early release from incarceration. So obviously that is different. That is, for people, abusers who are already in the criminal justice system. But it feels like one piece, and government is involved, less so much, organizations and nonprofits and the work that they do. But that's the first thing that kind of came to mind for me was the work. And I think that legislation is going to the governor's desk now.
I also know that Karina's law in Illinois, which mandates that firearms are removed from homes after an order of protection has been issued, recently went into effect this month. But Mina, I know that you talked a lot in the focus of your story as someone who didn't get an order of protection. And so many feel like their abusers do not face any type of accountability in these processes. But as you went through your reporting, what is available? Brandon's talked about a law that's moving through the state legislature. I just mentioned Karina's law. What is available for victims and survivors?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot available to victims and survivors. The network is an organization that is basically like an overarching organization where a lot of smaller organizations fit underneath. And they have a lot of really, really important resources for people in these types of situations. They have the Illinois Domestic Violence Hotline, and that is a number that people can call if they need help, if they are in an abusive relationship and they need shelter or they need counseling or they just need to figure out what a safety plan can look like for them. The Illinois Domestic Violence Hotline is a great resource for people. I know I've talked a lot about organizations losing funding, but there are a lot of organizations out there that are providing a lot of help with the resources that they have. One of those organizations is Family Rescue. They're the largest domestic violence service provider on the South Side. I featured them in my story. And they have a 36-bed shelter. They offer counseling. They offer other services for people in abusive relationships. And they are there for people on the South Side. There are dozens, hundreds of organizations really doing that kind of work. This violence is so personal. And because it often, plays out in a person's home, if you're listening to this and you know of someone who's in an abusive relationship, just support them, just let them talk to you, and just mention to them that there is a hotline that they can call. There are organizations that can help, and let them make the decision if they want to call or not. But there are organizations out there really trying to help, even though they are struggling to keep their funding.
I don't know about you, but my spidey senses is tingling because our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is swinging straight into the Griffin Museum of Science and Industry. Marvel Spider-Man Beyond Amazing, the exhibition, lets us explore the world of one of the most popular superheroes of all time. We can see rare comic books, props, and costumes from the Spider-Man movies, interactive installations, and life-size statues of characters like Miles Morales, Ghost Spider, and of course, Peter Parker himself. Fans can trace Spider-Man's story from its first comic book appearance in 1962 to its latest runs in TV, billion-dollar movies, and of course, my absolute favorite video game to play on the PS5. Don't miss Marvel Spider-Man Beyond Amazing, now open through February 8th, 2026 at the Griffin Museum of Science and Industry. Tickets on sale now at msichicago.org. Step right up. Cats is under the big top in Paramount's reimagined take on this legendary musical. That's right. The Tony Award-winning musical is at the Paramount Theater in Aurora, and audiences have been loving it. And sure, maybe you've seen Cats before, but trust me, you ain't never seen it quite like this. This circus tent of Jellicle Cats is a spectacle of contortion, acrobatics, juggling, and aerial feats, featuring the cats you know and love like Mungo Jerry, Bustopher Jones, and more. Running through June 15th, Paramount Theater's production of Cats is set to enchant a whole new generation. Get your tickets today at ParamountAurora.com. And hey, use the code CityCast for $5 off per ticket, up to 4 tickets. That's my gift to you. Brandis, 5 years after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor sparked protests across the country, especially right here in Chicago, where there is a notorious legacy of police violence, torture, and murder. We were in the starting months of a global pandemic, and people were seemingly having more conversations than ever about this country's history of white supremacy, particularly in policing. WTTW did a half-hour special on Black Voices this week, sitting down with community organizers, legal experts, small business owners, a former police chief, young people, asking if anything at all had changed. What did you learn in those conversations, Brandis?
I guess it depends on who you ask, right? Which is why we tried to have a lot of different voices on. And I think, yes, some things have changed. And I wonder if maybe those things have not changed in just the 5 years, because I think we all know that this issue is much older than just the last 5 years. Chicago alone, we can go back to the murder of Laquan McDonald in the city of Chicago at the hands of Chicago police officers. So, I mean, we heard from Craig Futterman, who I think is someone that a lot of us are familiar with, and he pointed to some progress that had been made. One of the segments was particular to community police relations. And I wondered, what's changed? And so he named a few things, right? Like, 20, 25 years ago, he makes the point that police officers killed people much more frequently than they do today. Like that, the amount of times that happens is the lowest it's ever been, which is progress. But I think we all know, of course, it still happens. And, CPD would say in some instances it is warranted. They had to. But, a lot of the cases that we learn and talk about, we often wonder if that's the case, right? If the police narrative is actually accurate. We spoke with an organizer, one of the co-founders of Good Kids Mad City, and those folks are still doing the work. And we know that, right? I think we still hear about them. I asked, though, I was like, a lot of folks who don't typically protest and stand up for this came out and and joined the folks who were always protesting back in the summer of 2020. And so I asked, I'm like, do you think everybody's moved away from it? Because from where I sit, it just feels like the same folks aren't still carrying the load as, that huge group that it was in summer of 2020. And he's like, no, actually they are, right? Like that when he, talks about the number of people to be protesting our current president. So he thinks maybe like that focus has not entirely shifted, but had to shift a little bit because they're making the case that obviously this administration is, clawing back a lot of the funding that would support organizations and the work that they do. And we certainly know about the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion that this president and his administration has made. So we had an entirely other segment about that where we heard from several people: Reverend Waltrina Middleton from Community Renewal Society, Xavier Ramey of Justice Informed, Mark Morial of the National Urban League. They just released a report last week subtitled, "Was it a moment or a movement?" And it sounds like, of course, the Urban League is still there trying to continue doing the work, but Mark Morial did use the words distressing, that he is distressed with some of what he sees happening as of late. And so it feels like, there was sort of a everybody kind of came out strong and lots of folks were all on the same page summer of 2020. And a lot of that went away. And it's gone 180, right? When you look at how some things are being handled right now. One person that we spoke with, and I thought this was telling, and I thought I knew I wanted to do this story when we did this segment. We spoke with the owner of Semicolon Books, and I recommend going and listening to her interview just because she, and other Black bookstore owners, they talked about how many books they sold summer of 2020. And y'all remember on your social media feeds, all the people who were like, I'm going to read How to Be an Anti-Racist and White Fragility and, a whole bunch of other books that were of the moment.
The other Race Relation 101
all of
books
them.
that
Exactly.
came out.
But a lot of people were at the time, ordering books. And in her interview, the owner of Semicolon, she says, we've got people who ordered, tons of books, and they were supposed to come to the store and pick them up. They paid for them. They never came and got those books. They may have tweeted the receipt or whatever and talked about how they're going to read the books. They didn't pick them up.
Organizers who I look up to in this city warned even in 2020 and 2021 as dollars were rolling in and social media profiles were growing for some people, even as mutual aid became a necessity throughout the pandemic and allyship seemed to be on the rise. There was always this warning that the commodification of the movement is taking place right underneath our feet, as it has always taken place underneath progressive movements. And we end up with a situation 5 years later where organizers feel exhausted. Some feel finessed. And so, 5 years later, so many of us feel exhausted, but also at the same time, there is this feeling that, so much of this, whether it was DEI moments or federal investigations, weren't going to bring the type of long lasting change that people really wanted to see.
And like we talk about this, we have this discussion at the same time about what's changed since then. And there's a whole lot of things that could have, should have, needed to change, right? But then we still have cases like Sonia Massey in Springfield. My colleague Heather Sharon still reporting, the $62.5 million to settle 4 police misconduct cases that city council is approving this week alone, and how they're always blowing past their budget. The fact that there is a budget to settle police misconduct cases in the city of Chicago says so much.
The fact that in the last year, we had to watch a video where 92 shots were fired into a vehicle after a traffic stop that now, is still moving its way through investigations where, this task force has already been founded for sort of racist and unconstitutional, unauthorized stops. And so,
And to the point of policing, a couple of the things that I'm remembering now that Craig Futterman offered was the Office COPA, Civilian Office of Police Accountability, which we know has been through several, iterations before it came to be what it is now, right? Like, police are wearing body cameras. They, the city is required to release that video within a certain amount of time, so then we can see what's happening in cases like Dexter Reed. So I guess it depends on how you look at it, whether it's, I think for folks who feel over-policed, for folks who feel like, their people are being killed at the hands of police officers far too much, any incident is too many.
We end every single episode of CityCast Chicago the same way, and that is with some good news. Mina, what is your good news for us today?
Okay, so I live in Logan Square, and I used to cover Logan Square area for Block Club for many years, and I'm a big fan of Middlebrow Pizza. I don't know if your listeners have been to Middlebrow, but it's a restaurant on Armitage, almost in California. They serve really good pizza, like really fluffy, like almost Detroit-style pizza. On Tuesdays, they do tavern style, which is really exciting, too. They do a really good tavern style. They've been written up by like Chicago Magazine and other places. A lot of foodies really like them too. And what's really exciting is that they are making like a special Detroit style pizza at the Beer Temple in Avondale, which is this like cool beer bar. They have tons of craft beer. I'm not even a beer drinker. I don't really care that much about beer, but I'm excited to try like a new version of Middlebrow Pizza. So the Beer Temple recently started serving this pizza, and they're actually having like a grand opening this weekend, but I think they've been actually serving the pizza for a few weeks now. But I am very excited to check it out because Middlebrow Pizza is very dope.
As someone who typically hates on Detroit style, I am going to trust your enthusiasm and try and pop over.
It's so good, man. Like the Detroit style pizza. Full disclosure, my husband, Patrick Smith of WBEZ, he is from Detroit, and we are in Detroit a lot, and I love Detroit. It's my second home, but Detroit style pizza is like my favorite pizza of all time. I think it's so good. You just got to get it from the right places. But it's so much better than Chicago style pizza, but I'll just stop.
Michelle, cut that last part out.
Yeah.
Cut it out.
It is the most Midwestern conversation ever to have a debate over whose pizza is better, Detroit or Chicago's tavern style, or I'm from Mississippi and I'm just like, it's pizza, you guys.
I just feel like I haven't had good Detroit style pizza. I feel like it's just been so much bread.
No.
so little cheese. I've been left disappointed each and every time. But I will give it another try over at the Beer Temple. Brandis, over to you. What is your good news?
I feel like it's not very cool, but I'm not going to lie to you. These Memorial Day sales. Take all my money.
They getting you.
Well, they're the best ones of the year, honestly.
They are.
Mm-hmm.
They are.
And I mean, I feel like I know my way around, some online sales, because when do I have time to go to a store and buy something physically? And they start early because capitalism. So you don't have to wait until like Friday or Memorial Day. So if you've got your eye on anything, if there's a thing you need, now's the time, people. It might be better than Black Friday, which starts in like October.
Yeah, I just got an email from Chicago Over Everything. They got a new Chicago, the Holy City t-shirt. Obviously, getting in on the Pope things. But they got like a warehouse sale coming up for this weekend. And so some of your favorite local galleries, local designers may also be popping out with some deals over the weekend to get in on the celebration. So definitely be paying attention.
Not me going to the Chicago Over Everything right now.
I'm going to have to put this pre-order in before we get out of here.
I know. I have to I don't know. I have to not look at stuff. Otherwise, I'll be too tempted to shop until I drop.
I will never tell you to not buy the thing.
I am going to round us out. As always, there is no shortage of events this weekend. You got Love Jones R&B at Duplex tonight. DJ Cash Era, one of my favorites. I'm going to pull up for Broken Shaker tonight. Then Shakira is going to be headlining Sueños, the first big music festival of the summer, which takes over Grant Park. I know for a lot of people, I said Mayfest last week, but really Memorial Day weekend and Sueños really is like the start of Chicago's every week there is a new festival to pop out to. But if you don't make it out to the big festivals, want something a little more low key, then you can check out our friend Chastity Cooper, who is celebrating National Wine Day this Sunday with a Logan Square wine crawl. They're going to be hitting 5 different spots over there. I could keep going, but follow Real One Show on Instagram, Chicago SoCal. There's like 40 concerts just today in the city of Chicago. And they got more throughout the weekend. But then, of course, the best place to find events for Memorial Day weekend is by visiting chicago.citycast.fm, checking out our events calendar. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, where we're sending you events every single day, Monday through Friday, with our larger newsletter. And then if you want a special email with some of our favorite events every week, then you got to sign up to become a member of CityCast Chicago. You'll also get other great perks like ad-free listening, members-only events. We got some special ones coming up soon, so you probably want to get in right now where you fit in. Please join me in giving a huge thank you to our guest today from WTTW, Brandis Freeman. Brandis, congratulations on your recent award at the Lissagore. Not only were you the host, but an award winner. Great to see you there.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
And to the fantastic investigative reporter from the award-winning Block Club Chicago, which cleaned up at those Lissagore Awards I just mentioned, Mina Bloom. Mina, always a great time.
Yeah, you too. It was great to be here.
Before we get out of here, please join me in thanking the people who make CityCast Chicago possible. Our executive producer is Simone Alisea. Our producer is Michelle Navarro. Our Hey Chicago newsletter editor is Emmy Mack. Our social media manager is Rick Homer. The music we all love is from the homie Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. Additional music this week from DJ Dens and Water Mirrors, courtesy of EpidemicSound.com. And as always, my last thank you is for me, because I be in here getting it in, doing the work, right? Bringing this thing to life for everybody. But of course, if you were not here, all of the work that we were doing would go pretty much unlistened to, unread. And so my last thank you is really for you, the people who make CityCast Chicago and Hey Chicago possible with your subscriptions, your visits, your suggestions, and everything in between. We are going to be off on Monday. We will talk to you again on Tuesday. In the meantime, in between time, be safe. Have a good weekend. We'll talk soon. Peace.